My name is Ciarán Walsh. I live in Ballyhaigh. I was born in Newry, but we travelled around the country and eventually I settled in the Ballyhaigh or Teagues town on Kerry Head. My interests, I've always been interested in people's history, which some would define as folklore, the knowledge of the people. But my interest in this particular story the story I'm about to tell, comes from a campaign to have 13 skulls that were stolen from the monastery, St. Coleman's Chapel. My interest in this story comes from a campaign to have 13 skulls that were stolen from Chapel Coleman, or the monastery as it's called, in Iasmaí in the year of 1890 by a man called Alfred Court-Haddon and his companion Andrew Francis Dixon. And they took the skulls with them back to Trinity, where they were put on display as part of an anthropological collection. And they remained there until last year, when eventually, after 15 years of hard campaigning, we managed to get them returned. It was half the collection. 10 other skulls from St. Finian's Bay and one from the Aran Islands remain on display in the same cabinet. One of the major issues is why the remains of these people were left in a niche beside the altar. And we began to trawl through the stories collected in the 1938 school books collection in the Folklore Commission, there are plenty of stories about wakes, but there are very few stories that we knew of at the time about skulls and looking after the remains of the dead. And what we found was that there is a rich tradition of warning people to respect the remains of the dead, because in graveyards were really unregulated up until about 40 years ago, and when a new grave was being opened, it was inevitable that an old grave would be disturbed, and the long bones were put back in the ground, and the head, the skull was placed in the church for safekeeping. And there's a rich body of stories in the school books collection warning people that these are here for safekeeping and they are not to be disturbed. So we developed this theme of stories called Don't Kick That Skull, and that comes from a story that was collected in Belmount or Cnuckenfa in Galway in February 1938. And I suppose telling it at the Storytelling Festival in Listowel on Saturday, Sunday, was important, because at 1:43 on Sunday afternoon, the 22nd of September, the sun crossed the sky and we moved from the old summer into the winter, the equinox, the autumnal equinox. And that's when the Celtic imagination switches from growth to the oncoming darkness, and the Festival of Sound, which is a reckoning with those who have passed, when on the night of Sound, and Sonia, you'd be a better source of stories on this than I would be, the door between the dead and the living opens over Samhain. And this story comes from that tradition. And I'll paraphrase it. The original is available in the school's book collection, which is available online at Dúchas.ie. And you just look up the school Belmont and the story is there. And essentially it's about two men, Martin Sheridan and John Kelly, who dig a grave. And I suppose one of the things that fascinates me about these stories is that they're rooted in the personal. This is John Kelly. This is Martin Sheridan. It's not there were two men. So here goes. I haven't done this before, so Here goes. John Kelly and Martin Sheridan were digging a grave in the graveyard in Crossboyne. They came across a coffin and they opened it and it was full of bones. So they took the bones out and laid them on the side of the grave. And John Kelly went over and kicked the skull. And Martin Sheridan said to him, "You shouldn't have done that. You need to respect the skull." So he took the skull and carefully put it back in the place from whence it came. Later that evening, John Kelly went home and went to bed. He was tired after a hard day's work digging the grave. And his mother was making tea in the kitchen. And there was a knock on the door and she went, and there was a stranger, and he said, "Is this the house where John Kelly lives?" And the mother said, "It is." He said, "Can I speak to him a little?" And she said, "Well, he's in bed. He's tired. He's been digging a grave all day and he's resting. But do come in and wait for him." So he came in and sat at the table. She offered him a cup of tea and some bread, and he said, "No, I'm okay." And eventually John Kelly came down the stairs, and the stranger said, "Do you mind if we walk a little along the road?" And John Kelly said, no problem. So they left the house and they came to a rise on the hill which overlooked the graveyard at Crossboyne. And the stranger says to John Kelly, "Were you digging a grave there today?" And he said, "I was." And he said, "Did you kick a skull?" And he said, "I did." And the stranger looked straight at him and said, "That was my skull. And I came to your home today to take you back with me. But your mother was kind to me and I've changed my mind. But remember, if you're digging a grave and you find a skull, don't kick it." And that became the theme